All right, Pat, looks like we are live. Friday morning edition of Coffee with Rich. I'm joined by my good friend Pat Doyle. Pat is a law enforcement officer in a southwestern United States city, right along the border. And here in just a moment, I'm going to read his very impressive bio. But before I do, let's talk about sponsors of the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show, which is America's #1 self-defense podcast that I have with my good friend, Mr. Mike Seeklander. If you don't know me, my name is Rich Brown. I'm the co-host, co-founder of the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show, retired Marine Corps officer, former police officer, corrections officer, special operations officer. And we are blessed to have some amazing sponsors like the Cool Fire Trainer. Cool Fire Trainer, guys, is an amazing tool. If you haven't seen it, it's your sights, your grip, your everything. It's your gun. All you got to do is replace the barrel and the barrel spring and turn it into an amazing dry fire training tool. They are doing so incredibly well right now. It looks like there's a back order of about 2 months wait time to get your Cool Fire Trainer, but trust me, the wait is worth it. Please check out all of our amazing sponsors and the discount codes in the American Warrior Show link that I've provided in today's show notes. You can find everything. It'll take you right to the site and get the amazing deep discounts available only to those that watch or listen to the American Warrior Show. Mountain Man Medical, the co-branded trauma kit, is finally available. They've been selling incredibly well. Make sure you pick one up, put one in your car, put one in your home. If you got a child that's heading off to school here next week or so, please make sure that they have a trauma kit to prepare them for what they're going to encounter without you. AppalachianStandard.com, my good friend Jesse Ross and his beautiful family are growing some of the finest CBD products money can buy. Like my lovely bride said, it was okay for me to tell. She had back surgery recently, and I've been using the Appalachian Standard salves on her back, and she's been getting some incredible relief from that. Please check them out below. Veteran-owned, veteran-grown craft hemp growers. Century Martial Arts, makers of the Bob XL. You're definitely going to want to pick up the Bob XL. Take your strike routine to the next level. Why get on a treadmill and do cardio when you can have a strike routine with a Bob XL? Or I was rolling the other day, Pat, with someone who does only 10th Planet brown belt, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu no-gi grappler. And this particular grappler had never rolled with anybody in the gi before, and they were immediately choked out with a lapel choke. So you could I say that because you could put a gi on old Bob and work on some of your lapel chokes, and Bob don't mind. Let's talk about Precision Holsters, man. Precision Holsters, makers of a competition line, as well as the Ultra Appendix holster that me and Mike use. Please check out them and all their amazing products. They are an incredible company, American-made, veteran-run company, which is incredibly important. So please check them out. We've got 14 folks joining us now. Please like and hit that share button. I've got an amazing guest today. I've been wanting to have Pat on for a long time. Pat, let's welcome some of the people joining us. We've got Gerald on, Tony is on, Guile out there in the Philippines is on, Ryan is on, Greg is on. Greg says, good morning, Rich and Pat. Good morning, everyone. Greg is coin number 2060. If you want to know what a coin number is, please check out AmericanWarriorSociety.com and find out if becoming a member of our self-defense community is the right decision for you. Mark is on from Toronto. William is on. Matt Sims. Good morning, Matt. Got a fellow competitive shooter on this morning. Absolutely. 14 folks joining us live. Pat, let me read your impressive bio, my friend. Pat Doyle has over 26 years of law enforcement experience. During his career, he has been a member of his department's SWAT team, K-9 unit, and gang unit. During his time with the SWAT team, he was a team leader. Pat is FBI SWAT certified, DOE SWAT certified, including instructor certified, New Mexico Master Instructor certified, SWAT Firearms active shooter response, a K-9 instructor. His competition credentials include USPSA competitive shooter with a Grand Master rating, production limited and limited 10, and IDPA. Pat is a distinguished master. Pat, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, long time coming. Been wanting to do this for a while. You know, Pat, you're one of those rare, you're one of that rare breed that is not only a law enforcement officer with incredible credentials, but also a high level competitive shooter. And we were talking just the other day, there's probably, I don't know, man, maybe 100 or so in the country, if that.
Yeah, it's been a good ride. You know, we we wanted to tag something differently coming into law enforcement after going to a few schools. And met somebody early on, said, if you really want to take it to the next level as a firearms instructor, you got to get into competitive shooting. So I started down the road with USPSA. And it's been one heck of a ride since then.
I would say so. Tell us about what is your bio overlook? I know that's a very succinct bio for you, Pat. What's it missing?
Well, I've been a police officer my entire life. Started in my early 20s while I was in college in New Mexico. Started doing reserve work and then got hired on full time. Did that and then went to work full time for Department of Energy for a year and a half or so. Really missed law enforcement work and decided to come back. And then began again with my career in with SWAT and K9 and a little bit of everything else. Along with that, we were assigned to the New Mexico State Police SWAT team, which is a multi-jurisdictional SWAT response. So we're responsible for basically half of New Mexico. So we go all over the place and do some really interesting stuff along the border. Along the way, I went to work for Department of Energy for a while. I got to meet a lot of very incredible people that would challenge you. And that really helped me out. And that's where I started in the competitive aspect with some of the guys who came from special operations backgrounds. And then from there, I just had a knack for it and absolutely fell. Something that started as a hobby became my obsession. And, throughout the time, I met a lot of great people, met Mike and you out at the United States Shooting Academy. That really changed my mind on how to prepare better as an instructor and to work with different groups, people, military guys, law enforcement, civilian side as well. Was very blessed and fortunate to learn a tremendous amount from that. Along the way, I'm pretty much was given a blank checkbook by my organization to rewrite our curriculum and our doctrines. For about 10 years, I got to basically write a check to anybody I wanted to go train with. You name them professionally, organizationally, I've probably done some line of training with them and got to bring back a lot of valuable information to our law enforcement officers. And, through, Mike and you and practical shooting performance in USSA at the time, got to work with a lot of police officers, and I felt that was my niche. I love working with the military guys and teaching, but I've always been, kind of the moth to the light brought back to law enforcement. It's been one heck of a ride.
Yeah, it has, man. And your group out there and along the border, let's just say that, are some amazing shooters. It's obvious that you have really taken them under your wing. It looks like our good friend, Mr. Mike Seeklander, is on. It says, "Morning, Pat."
Hello, Mike. How are you, buddy? I hope you're doing well. I'm sure you are.
Hey, what is the state of law enforcement today? And I guess you're incredibly well qualified to answer that question because you have over 26 years. I mean, going on 3 decades in law enforcement, Pat. What is the state of law enforcement today?
It's a rough spell right now. Most of that I've spent in some kind of specialized unit, Marshals Task Force, FBI Task Force, things of that organization, where we were structured to go chase bad guys. And most of it has been as a supervisor or manager in these programs. And I can tell you, with that experience right now, it's a rough go. I don't think there's a single police organization right now that can say that they're completely, fully staffed or funded right now. And you're starting to see that drain is starting to have a cumulative effect on some of the officers. I've seen it on several of mine. It's been a rough go. I try to tell people, working through a pandemic was very trying. Every law enforcement officer, every law enforcement agency I speak to at this point in time has issues with huge spikes and increases in crime, specifically violent crime, and with the lowest staffing levels that we have ever seen in law enforcement. So it is challenging right now, but the men and women in this, in this profession are They're ready for it. They're ready for it, and they're gonna handle it. They're gonna handle it, and we'll make it through this one. We've made it through other rough spells. We will make it through, but I think this one's going to be a little bit longer in duration for us. But we will find a way.
What advice would you give someone just now coming into the profession, Pat?
Well, right now, I would absolutely, tell them that you're starting to see the retirement plans are changing for a little bit more of a longer haul. So they're going to be in the profession for a little bit longer. They got to have tremendous family support. You got to be able, your family has got to be behind you in this career. To be quite honest, they're going to be thrown into a meat grinder. There's no, you can say what you want about it, but these men and women are being put into the worst situations and making life and death situations on a daily basis. So I would also tell them that, that they have got to understand, they've got to be better. That's bottom line. They have to be better. We need to expect more out of them. There's no doubt about it. They have got to be better at what they do. We can't get them the proper staffing. Everybody says, well, we're going to get staffing up to the levels that they need. That's not going to happen. That's a 5-year plan. Budget cycles for government organizations go year to year. It takes 2 years to select, train, recruit, and put somebody in the front seat of a police car or a corrections facility or an EMT or a firefighter. And we're all pulling from the same resource pool. So we have our challenges ahead of us. And bottom line, when I walk into a recruit class and I look across the table, I challenge them and say, I absolutely need you to be better. I can't get you the numbers that we need for staffing. That's just not going to happen. But I do need you to be better at what you do every day.
Yeah, one of the things I have, and I regret that I haven't asked more of my guests, but one of the things is there a line in the sand, Pat? Whereas if they remove qualified immunity, or if they do something like that, I say a collective pronoun of they, meaning whoever administration, the whoever. If they remove a certain thing, or is there a line that's just too far for you?
No, in New Mexico, we have just lost qualified immunity. And will it create issues? Absolutely. I was just teaching up in Colorado. They've lost qualified immunity, and you start seeing that across the board. But the rising, the rising crime rates that we're seeing in our communities, that puts that a little bit farther back for me. I think if we have our sense of duty and basically qualified immunity, if we're doing everything right and following the rules, I think we'll be fine. If you do anything, what they say is shocks the conscience standard, then there's going to be then you need to answer some questions. But I think if we continue to push hard, train hard, select the most qualified candidates, which is getting tougher, we'll be able to make it through. But we've absolutely already lost qualified immunity, and that makes it tough when you're like a team leader or a SWAT team commander. You make the wrong decision, and in a very complex time frame, it could cost you, your child's, your kids' college funds, and things like that. So, for me, I can leave. I could leave anytime I want. We have a 20-year retirement where I'm from, but I'm still here. Like I try to tell people, I'm playing with the casino's money now. But I have a hard time thinking right now, and you don't talk to police supervisors or managers, and they don't tell you this. Organizations are hemorrhaging cops right now. I mean, we're losing cops to go sell real estate, and we're losing police officers to go drive trucks. We're losing police officers they're just saying, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I'll be quite honest, I don't know if that's the solution with the crime problems that we're seeing in our communities right now.
No, it's not. And Mike asks, can you discuss what qualified immunity is? We probably should have broke that down, Pat. Can you explain that to the guests?
Yeah, so qualified immunity is basically, as long as you're doing your job within the confines of your policies, the precedents of case law, things of that nature, you will have a level of government support when things go bad. Officer-involved shootings, vehicle pursuits and crashes. If you don't do your job, maybe it's a child abuse case that you didn't want to handle correctly or things like that. We're starting to see a lot of those come back. So the qualified immunity is basically there's a little net that will help you to absorb that overall liability. Without qualified immunity, you can now be held personally liable outside of the organization. New Mexico, it still just makes it easier for the organizations to get sued. In Colorado, you can be held individually liable for decisions that you make. My daughter plays on a softball team, and actually an attorney is his daughter plays on the team with my daughter. And we were having dinner at his house the other day. He just flat out said it just made it easier for attorneys to make a lot of money.
Oh, absolutely.
So it has pulled a lot of that out. And any police action, whether it's a child crimes case or vehicle pursuit or an officer shooting or SWAT application, there's a lot left open for interpretation. And unfortunately, most people's overall interpretations don't lend to the basic facts of some things that are going on. And a lot of organizations leave facts out because they have to protect their employees. And so it's usually the first narrative you hear is probably not the best one. And so that could take over a lot. But, the qualified immunity thing, I think they're trying to attack it nationally as well, which kind of blows my mind a little bit because, the Department of Justice comes through and, puts all these mandates on these organizations. And I've worked with several federal agencies throughout the years, and not a single one of them had a body-worn camera or a policy to turn it on or,
You there, Pat? I think we lost your audio. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can't hear you, buddy.
Let's see here.
There we go.
There we are, I think.
All right, cool.
There we go. Oh, I'm sorry about that. And so, you're starting to see, the federal agencies, they talk about a lot of things. And it's like, wait a minute, I don't know a single FBI agent with a body-worn camera or a U.S. Marshal with a body-worn camera. They keep saying it's coming. But the Department of Justice comes through and mandates all of these changes and all these practices for local law enforcement. But, and I love my FBI agents. I love my U.S. Marshals. Sometimes they're not playing with the same rules that they're enforcing on everyone else.
Yeah, I tell you, if you've been in this game any length of time, you've probably been sued at some point. We chuckle. Most of the folks on here this morning are current and former law enforcement. And I tell you, my brother, I think, was sued. I, of course, was sued. Most of my friends were sued. And luckily back then we had qualified immunity, and a lot of it got thrown out before it ever went to trial because we were acting in accordance with our department policy and the laws, et cetera. But it doesn't stop people from bringing frivolous lawsuits. But now, without qualified immunity, they're not going to be frivolous anymore. And here's the thing that bothers me. You're not going to be judged by a jury of your peers, meaning other current and former law enforcement. You're going to be judged by the people that have never walked a mile in your shoes. They have no idea what it's like to be a law enforcement officer. It would almost be better, in my opinion, if you sat before a judge and judge only. If you get in front of a jury, I think it's going to be tough.
Especially now, the juries now bring from their field of experience, and a lot of that's in social media right now. They have their own feelings of what is going on and how things should be, and it's it's just one of those things. I know I just saw one of the things, body-worn cameras make it easier to fire bad cops. That is true, but there's also a lot of unintended consequences of those cameras as well. A lot of the things that people want to see, they want to see, they're morgue monsters. They want to see the violence and the death and people in accidents, people that are victims of violent crime. And I think we need to do a better way of handling that. And people say, well, no, absolutely not. I pay your salary. Okay. So that time that you're going to be the victim of a crime or a violent auto crash or something like that, I walk up. Should your video be all over YouTube or something like that? Again, so everything that we do has some sort of unintended consequence. And we've seen that time and time again. But I think the thing with the qualified immunity is in fact going to start going away. But what you're going to start seeing, that my wife works in the education field, is it went straight. It wasn't just law enforcement.
Yeah.
It was government entities across the board. So schools are going to be looking at it. Child welfare programs are going to be looking at it. Counseling programs are going to be looking at it. So like I said, I understand what they're trying to get to, and I am 1,000% behind keeping our officers in line and absolutely holding them accountable for decisions that they make. But just the blanket policies that we see are not working. They're not working.
No, I would surmise that they're not. Dave Brothers, good morning, sir. He is on. He asked the question: Is there a
Good morning, Dave.
Is there a law enforcement officer troop to task methodology, meaning one law enforcement officer per 3,000 citizens? Is there something like that?
Well, I know they have some programs that work like that, but the problem is you look at the density patterns of some cities. You'll have density patterns in your east cities; they're more vertically integrated, whereas where I'm from, not as much. I don't have enough people to put there because the communities I have to are hundreds of miles apart. I mean, I've driven 3 hours at 120 miles an hour to go to a barricade as a SWAT team leader to reach a community. That community maybe will only have 1 or 2 police officers available to it. I know you see a lot of that in the Midwest as well. The density clusters are very, very tough to project that, to say exactly how many, who, and what their capabilities are. So it's a very difficult question to answer. But I can tell you that I don't know a single law enforcement entity that's stepped up and said, hey, we're fully staffed and we're having a good time. Everybody is struggling and pulling extra double shifts. And, they used to say, hey, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but we're robbing Peter to pay Peter now.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well said. Pat, you're obviously a high-level competitive shooter, USPSA Grandmaster, IDPA Distinguished Master. So I know you have a lot of time behind the gun, both tactically and competitively. But tell us also about the other things that you do to stay prepared for your job, like powerlifting, or if you do any combatives, et cetera.
Yeah, very early on, did a lot of sports in college and high school. So I had a very rigorous workout pattern. Kept it all the way through. Try to keep your SWAT. You got to stay fit to be on our SWAT teams. So I've had a lot of problems with my knees in the last year or two, so I can't do a whole lot of the running anymore. The combative stuff, being from New Mexico, it's pretty popular. I mean, it's not like Oklahoma. Sorry, Mike. We don't have junior varsity wrestlers that are going to be going to Nebraska. Like Brian Hill. But we are the land of Jackson Winklejohn, and so there is a huge push for MMA and things like that. We're early on, our agencies really did transition into a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu MMA formats and rolling around and doing a lot of things like that. But I do everything. I try to do at least something every day. Have an elliptical, have a bike here at the house. Do a little something to stay in shape. Working a lot of extra shifts and just shift work in general is really, really tough to maintain that rigorous schedule. They have fantastic gyms at my different police departments I have here that I work. And we're getting time to work out, but mostly right now, I don't do a lot of powerlifting, but I'll just go in and do some basic workouts and things like that to stay in shape and keep the blood going.
Is there one thing more than another that you think is more beneficial to being a law enforcement officer, as far as whether that's a workout routine, mental exercise? I have no idea, Pat. What do you think?
Well, I would say do something every day to challenge yourself. Whether it's you wake up and you get a regular dry fire routine, whether you got an MMA schedule or, boxing or, something like that. Have a workout routine, and you got to stick to it. You got to make that part of your day. So where if you miss it, you're kind of mad at yourself. You feel a little bit like you let yourself down. And again, I try to challenge, grab a policy manual, grab a book and read a law book, just grab a book and open it and start reading it. I have books next to my nightstand, and what I'll do is I'll just grab a book and I'll just open it, and from wherever I'm at, I'll read for 15 or 20, 30 minutes a day, just to try to challenge yourself and stimulate your mind still. I know it's tough. I should say, as a trainer, follow the regiment. The regiment exists. Make sure. But as a law enforcement officer, our regiment now is not as structured as it used to be, but it's still on you as an individual to maintain that, and it's what's best, for you physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Yeah, I like that. So, speaking as of being an instructor, Pat, I know you've got a lot of time as an instructor. In your opinion, what makes a great instructor?
Well, I used to think that if you had a whole lot of skill, you can go up there and you can impress people. And again, I had a free checkbook, so if you name a professional shooter or a high level entity, I've probably trained with them, and some very, very talented people. But what I learned is, and I had a knack. Stay off the phone. I had a knack for doing pretty well competitively shooting, 3-gun, 2-gun, USPSA IDPA Steel Challenge. But I needed some sharpening on how to actually teach and how to connect to people. I'm pretty good at connecting with people. I can have a conversation, with a cushion if I had to on a couch. But I needed to polish those edges, and I thank you and Mike for putting it, especially with Mike, working with Mike all those years at USSA. And I started there. I was with the first program at USSA when it was mud fields and a trailer, and you guys went through and did the selection of all the instructor staff. I really had to learn how to get that organization in front of me. So you got to have a little bit of all of it. You got to be intelligent enough to understand the program you're trying to teach. You got to understand the value of the programs you're trying to teach. You got to understand, you got to read the room when you walk in and realize you're working with. And you got to have that structure to make sure you can reach those objectives and goals. A lot of people, if you're missing one component, they'll say, well, it was a great class. I had a great time. We did a great drill package, but did you actually have adult learning occurring? And that's been the biggest journey for me.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the structure of instructing, and I like how you just said that. Dave asked the question, what is a good balance of training to practice? For example, for every hour on the street, how many hours of training should be behind it?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I mean, I know there was a podcast, a very popular podcast person that said that, law enforcement officers should be training 30% of the time. That's not going to happen. And I respect that gentleman a lot. And I know he's been in the middle of a whole lot of stuff. But, bottom line, the two things in law enforcement right now, the two things in law enforcement that we're struggling with is, number one is obviously ammunition. We can't find it either. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean we get it cheaper. Our budgets are getting blown out. And the other commodity that we have right now is staffing and time. So we have got to be better in what we do and how we relay this information within this time frame. Whereas before, we would be allowed a 40-hour class for a pistol course, a week long on the range with, professional shooters like Mike and you and, some of the other guys. I can't say what I'm going to teach you in 40 hours. I can do it in 8 or 16 hours, but I have to be able to pick, those important factors and bring those down and say, these are the things I have to focus on working with. So there's quite a challenge when it comes to law enforcement. And I imagine it's the same thing with the military as well.
Oh, yeah. What advice would you give to a new instructor, Pat? Somebody just getting started.
You got to be able to get the information out there. You got to have a natural talent for it as well. It's got to be a little bit of art and science are going to come together. Some people are just, naturally, good friends of mine will say they have a lot of horsepower, but they don't know the direction it needs to go. Become a subject matter expert. Don't be afraid to unlearn something. We've all been down that path to where we may have, the last thing you heard was the best thing you heard. Don't be afraid to unlearn something and absolutely learn the value of structured organization when you're teaching. And again, we brought you and Mike in to do the program for our whole agency. And, we have been pat on the back for years and years and years, you know, being great instructors, you know, hey, we brought all this change to these organizations and yay, we're great. And you guys came in and say, look, we can polish you up. And you know, my guys to this day are pulling out those manuals and do, you know, I mean, we'll be doing something like, hey, we back to question, do that. I mean, they're quoting you guys still to this day. So that's a huge thing, is to learn how to teach as well as what to teach, become a subject matter expert in both of them as well. And you'll see a lot better, you know, programs. And again, a lot of the stuff you see right now is social media based. I mean, if you got an Instagram or a Snapchat, I mean, we have a million people watching somebody climb up a crate right now. Come on.
I know. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
It really
you know,
does.
I mean, it's just one of those things. I mean, you know, and spend time on the things that you can solve. And, you know, I always, you know, after a lot of, you know, we have bad incidents out there in law enforcement, I'll send text out to my pro shooters or, you know, my friends that are in special operations or SWAT guys or whatever. And I'll challenge them, hey, you need to step up your game. You need to step up your game. You know, we need to teach responsibly armed citizens to be better. We need to teach our law enforcement officers to be better. We need to teach our special operators to be better. Our soldiers, our Marines, you know, I need them to be better. You know, we have a vested interest in them. So to become a great instructor in those, you know, you're offering a lot and you're investing a lot more than just your time or trying, you know, get a t-shirt or a patch.
Yeah. Well said, Pat. Well said. As you watch the events unfold in Afghanistan, we're going to shift gears a little bit, brother, because I think it would be, you know, remiss if we didn't talk about it, because I know it's going on and every American's glued to the set watching what's going on in Afghanistan. What are your thoughts, Pat?
Well, you know, you see, again, I think it's just a failure of leadership. It's just an absolute failure of leadership. You know, for 20 years, we've been in the middle of this, and, you know, and then all of a sudden it's just like, no, we're going to walk on everything. And everybody's like, well, you know, you could say that as a police officer, but, you know, I have a very, again, vested interest in this because, you know, my daughter is in the Marine Corps right now. She is certifying this week with a bomb dog. You know, this could be a very, very real thing for her. And she's done everything she can to prepare herself for the eventuality of this. So, you know, it's heartbreaking. You know, you see the effort and of everything that's gone on over the last couple generations, the sacrifice, just to be like, you know, we're done. And I think it's just an overall lack of leadership that we're seeing throughout the country, even if it's at a city council level, county commissioner level, mayor, governors, and now at the top level. We're starting to see this failure of some of these programs. I mean, you know, we have the highest crime rates you've ever seen. We have an international incident they're saying is probably going to be one of the worst in the history of the country. And we're sitting around wondering about what sex we need to police. Nah, we have way too many priorities to worry about right now than some of the social discourse that's going on. So my heart is absolutely broken when it comes down to what's going on in Afghanistan. And I think it's probably going to get worse.
Yeah, I'm afraid it is probably going to get worse. And, you know, what's interesting talking to my oldest son, who's, let's see, 24 years old. And he's just like, Dad, I just figured it's always been like this. I said, no, it hasn't always been like this. And it shouldn't be like this. It's an absolute travesty, failure of leadership, I think is the best way to put it. Because if you would have told me in 2001, 2002, 2003, that we would be leaning on the Taliban to keep us safe. I mean, I can't remember. I remember it was the Secretary of State or who said it yesterday. Maybe have been CENTCOM commander, a 4-star Marine Corps general, says, well, you know, we're relying on the Taliban to keep us safe as we pull out of there. And I'm like, am I taking crazy pills? What in the hell is going on here?
Yeah, that was kind of rough to, you know, when you know, the guys that you spent the last 20 years hunting down, you give them the keys to the gates and you wonder why there's a failure in your security protocols. And it's kind of like, you know, you want the 7th grader to tell you what happened? Because they've probably figured it out by now too.
Yeah. And the other thing they said was, and somebody needs to be, you know, definitely need to be fired and potentially prosecuted for giving the Taliban a list of our Afghanistan partners and Americans in Afghanistan so that they can get safe passage. Here's the deal. Most of the Taliban can't read, folks. I know that Taliban is Pashtun or whatever for students or the students, but these students can't read and write. And you can see that when these journalists pull up to the checkpoints, like, look, I have a letter from your Taliban commander that says I can come through here. And the guys are holding it upside down. They can't read it. But we're going to give these folks a list of who they're supposed to let through the lines. It's absolutely treasonous. And Dave Brothers asked the question. He says, what is your definition of leadership? What is your definition, Pat?
Well, I mean, it's very simple. You must be the example. You must have a very clear and concise understanding what mission you're trying to accomplish. And as a leader, you must be the example in text, in action, in words, and everything that you must be the example every single time. And I think we're failing to see that right now on a lot of levels. And it's just, you know, it blows my mind of what we can do. I mean, there's no sustainability in this program, and I think people, Marines and people have a strong sense of service, and first responders, when they see, the first thing is we're not allowed to just walk away from something. We are all inherent problem solvers, and we're not solving this problem. We're just walking away from it, and it has very real consequences that we have seen and we will continue to see. And eventually somebody's going to have to come in and solve the problem. And therein, you've got to be efficient in words and actions and be that absolute leader and be the example in all that you do.
Yeah, I love it. I totally agree with it. And when I look at most of our elected leaders, I don't see that. I think back to just to cite one thing, Pat. It was the Ryan Murray bipartisan bill where they were trying to stop a government shutdown. So Paul Ryan and whoever the lady was, Murray, they got together and said, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to save the government trillions of dollars over the next 20 years. We're going to reduce military retiree pay by 1% every year over time. And I'm like, I'm a retired Marine Corps officer. And I'm like, you're going to steal 1% from me and my family every single year. Now, granted, I've got all my limbs, all my fingers and toes, but there's a lot of my friends that don't. And you're going to steal from them what they've earned with their blood and sacrifice. Now, if the Senate would have said, that's okay, guys, because we're going to take a 2%, or we're going to take a 1.25, or hell, we're going to take a 1% cut with you and shoulder part of the burden, but they did not. And it goes back to what you just said, Pat. There's no setting the example in today's elected leadership that I see.
And I'm not seeing it either. And I know we're all human, we make mistakes. But what we're seeing right now globally, I think it's going to get worse. I think it's going to have a compounding effect. I grew up, how I came to New Mexico. I was born in Massachusetts. How I came to New Mexico is my dad was in the spinal cord unit at the VA hospital. He was a paraplegic. And so we spent a whole lot of time in VA hospitals up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And, like you said, you get to see, these men and women who have given their everything time and time again. And as a young kid, 6, 7 years old, I didn't get summer vacations to go do that. I had, my dad had to be at the VA, so we had to go spend time with him. So that was kind of our daycare. And I learned very early on the value of leadership. And I also learned the value that I have absolutely nothing to feel sorry for myself about. And I think the value of leadership can learn from that. When you see the sacrifice of the men and women who've been overseas, and just to be able to pick up on, it's like a board game. Let's just pick it up where we left off. Let's just wander off. It is not that. It has very real consequences, and we're seeing that. And we probably will see more today and tomorrow, and it's going to continue.
And I don't see it ending as long as we keep these career politicians in office. And I use our current president, 46th president of the United States, Joe Biden. This is a guy that was in office when Saigon fell. Yeah. And he's still there today. So what has he learned? And oh, by the way, how does a guy like Joe Biden, whose father was a used car salesman, look it up, folks, become a multi-millionaire with beach houses, etc., if all he's ever done is been an elected official for the past 40 plus years? It riddled me that one. because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Absolutely.
Will Parker says, I recently read we all need to get comfortable with two words for these types. The first starts with an F and the second starts with a Y. Uh, yeah. What are the long-term implications of what we're seeing right now, whether it be in Afghanistan or on the streets of America?
Well, the absolute inability to look at the situation for what it is, and to make those value-based judgments. I mean, and it's difficult. I try not to get involved in the politics. I have friends that are very, very liberal. I have friends that are very conservative. And sometimes with an arguments, I say, we're not seeing all the facts together of some of these things, and so, we got to understand that, the policies that we're implementing now on the streets are not working. The policies that we're implementing within our communities are not working. Internationally, it is not working. In any other profession, it's based on performance. And if you're not performing, you're let go, or you're put on a plan to make sure you're better. And we're not doing that. We're on a continuous decline. And I think we're just failing leadership. I remember yesterday, as we're watching the news, I was actually fishing with my daughter in the morning. I started getting text alerts about what's going on. And so when I got home, I was pretty much glued to the TV watching the news channels. And the one thing that I thought was very refreshing, every news channel I got on, I started seeing whole screens full of Green Berets, Navy SEALs, and Marines that are stepping up to the place. And not only do we serve, but we still have a heart for sacrifice. And now we're going to be getting involved in politics and continue to serve. And that was refreshing. So now you're going to start seeing some of that value-based leadership. And I think the next generation is going to do amazing things to help correct the direction of the ship that we're on right now. What we're doing right now is not sustainable.
No, and to your point, Pat, about the former, vets that are stepping up to the plate. I was reading just this morning, so I haven't read all of it, so I apologize because I was rushing to get on here with you. But a group of special operators, don't know who they were. They slipped into Afghanistan. You can read it this morning. It's on the news cycle. And somehow they called it Operation Pineapple Express. They slipped into the country, rounded up 500 of folks they used to work with, and got them into the airport for evacuation. And that's without any support from the government, from the American government or the Taliban. So it just shows what a few motivated people can do that are capable and competent folks. And I think we as Americans need to demand that same level of commitment and leadership from those that are elected officials. What do you think, Pat?
100% agree with that. Absolutely. Like you said, guys with motivation, and they had direction. They had understanding of their mission. And again, do you run a Fortune 500 company, like you run a SWAT team mission or a SEAL team or something like that? No, but here's the thing. It's not, I'm sorry, I'm reading some of the questions as they pop up. It's definite in that the how they want to get from one objective to the next. They push themselves hard physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and again, they're all in. They're absolutely all in. What did it take for these guys to leave the comfort? And many of them, if they're coming from a special operations background, can go to a six-figure job doing whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
Leave the comfort of that to go to a foreign land to help people they don't even know. That in and of itself is extremely noble, and that's what you can build a country and an organization around. And I hope that's the direction we are going.
And I sure hope so. Yeah. Jeff says Joe Biden alluded to white supremacists as the top threat for America. Do you deal with their terrorist actions often, Pat?
No.
No.
Every once in a while, when I was in the gang unit, we were assigned to the FBI gang task force. We'd run into some white supremacist gangs, but it was. I
would say, yeah. When he said that, my thought is, show me the data, because I don't see it. I don't see it.
I think, yeah, and I think their definition of white supremacy and ours is a little bit differently. I think I had people come up and tell me, well, you have a blue line, T-shirt on in the gym today. You support white supremacy. I'm like, so when did the blue line shirt become the Confederate flag of this generation, or now the American flag become the Confederate flag of this generation? So I think, they keep changing the goalposts on what white supremacy is. And I don't agree with that at all whatsoever. And so absolutely, I don't even think it would make the top 100 list. I really don't.
No, I don't think so either. Like, again, I don't think there's if you look at the Department of Justice Uniform Crime Report or any of the other things that measure these, there's nothing to that at all. So I don't know what the agenda is, why someone would knowingly and willfully, intentionally force feed that agenda to us. I think it's ridiculous. And Vice recently said, and Dan Crenshaw, Congressman Crenshaw, former Navy SEAL, lost his eye in the war. He had a point. He said Vice magazine said that former Marines are overrepresented in the neo-Nazi community. And he was like, really? Marines just gave their life right now at the airport. And you're going to say that? And I think it goes to something you said. Our community, that whether it's a law enforcement or veteran community, are overrepresented. I'll give you an example, Pat. I was at Jiu-Jitsu Monday night, and it's a class that Gracie Baja has a Adopt a Cop program, so it's free for law enforcement officers to come and train. And I'm rolling with a bunch of guys, and all of a sudden I realized, like, dude, there's like 10 people here, and 7 of them are former Marines. And they're cops and firemen and stuff like that. And to hear someone say that they're overrepresented in white supremacists, and I think that it goes back to what you said. They're changing the definition of things.
Yeah, I would just show them the picture of that Marine lifting the baby over concertina wire to make sure that baby had not only a future, but at least that day of peace. So, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, are Marines motivated? Yeah, absolutely. Are they opinionated? Absolutely. And that's a great thing. And I don't believe that at all. I know that's a big push they're talking about. When people are coming in, from law enforcement, from a military background, like, well, we need to make sure that they're not, extremists. The big push is for diversity, inclusiveness, and bias and everything. And I don't see that. It like I said, the goalposts and the definitions are constantly changing, and it's hard. It's impossible to stay up with what we're talking about right now is probably going to be offensive to somebody in 3 months.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. And thank you to the 30 folks that are joining us live right now. Someone just shared this with you, and you're like, who are these guys talking? My name is Rich Brown, retired Marine Corps officer, former police officer, corrections officer, and special operations officer. I'm joined by Pat Doyle, USPSA Grand Master, IDPA Distinguished Master, and over 26 years law enforcement professional. And we are discussing the state of America today, among many other things. We talked about the long-term implication of this, Pat. Where is all this lawlessness headed, man?
We'll get it back. I promise you. We're fighting to keep this country. Just where I'm from in New Mexico, our crime rates, we just released some crime stats, and we're seeing our crime stats 70-80% increase in our violent crime, property crime 100% increases in some cases, and they're all interrate. It's all. We just released these stats for the last year. I was like, well, what training did we do on this? Well, we have everybody through bias-based training now. We have everybody in CIT training, which is important. I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're seeing a change in how we're doing some of our training. And like the bias-based training, I just went through. I'm an instructor in bias-based training now. I'm like, okay, great. And I thought it was going to be the black versus white thing, and it's really not. It's just just intrinsic biases that everybody has in the day-to-day and how they affect your decisions. Great. And so we're sitting down talking, and the instructor says, "Here's how we talk about it." He asks, "Do you have a daughter?" I say, "Yeah, I have a 9-year-old daughter." Okay. If you're walking down the street and you're walking against traffic, what side do you have her on? I'll have her on my right side, because I don't want her to be along traffic. I want to show her how to be safe. If you walk up to a homeless person who looks like a meth head, what are you going to do with her? Well, we'll put her on the other side. Well, right there, you've just introduced a bias to your daughter about, people and they're economically challenged. And, me being the law enforcement guy and the SWAT guy, I was like, no, I pretty much just saved this guy a hospital bill, because if you tried to touch my daughter, he'd be Spartan kicked. So that, that kind of stuff. So we're seeing a lot of that coming into law enforcement, and that seems to be like the emphasis now, because you got to silence some of these critics who don't have all the information. Now, do officers make mistakes? Absolutely, every single day. Do teachers or doctors or everybody is going to make a mistake? But we're captured in a bubble, right now, and that's why we say the only way out of it is to train our officers to be better every day. We have to support them financially. I put something out on social media today. A couple of my friends up in Albuquerque, we had 4 officers shot in an incident. And I basically said, if you're an administrator, you need to be a better administrator. If you're a trainer, you need to be a better trainer. If you're a cop, you got to do cop work better. Staffing is not going to solve itself. That's a 5-year plan. But our cities right now, with the rising crime rates, it's an ongoing, continuous problem. And if I was chief of police or sheriff, I'm not, or will ever be, I would offer my firearms instructors to teach free firearms classes to people. Or, if you can't get a hold of the crime in your communities, and it's 70, 80, 90% increase in violent crime, murders. We just had a guy chop somebody's head off and play soccer in a park in my community. Those kinds of things people see, and they want to understand and have an opportunity to keep themselves safe. And I'm sorry, I can't tell you as a law enforcement officer, I'm going to do it. And if anybody, or a sheriff, or somebody, a chief of police or city council say, no, we have a police force to keep you safe. You have a police report. You have a police force to report crime right now. We're doing very, very little of the proactive law enforcement. I was fortunate for a lot of years. I was on teams that was 100% proactive. We went and we were shaking trees and chasing down the bad guys every single day. And that's why you want to come to law enforcement and be on teams like that. And I was very blessed to do that. But because of staffing, those groups are being pulled out and everybody else is looking in.
Yeah, that's so true, man. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about the bias thing. I think we do need to recognize it. Not all biases are bad, and I'll give you just one example among millions, and that is, Officer Terry, the Terry stop and frisk. He sees a group of people that don't look like the people that live in that community, and they're wearing long coats, and he pushes them against a wall and stops a bank robbery. And that's what you were talking about, the shaking trees and stuff like that, and being able to recognize, because of the years you spent as a law enforcement officer. I don't live along the border. You do. What's common in that community. I perhaps would not recognize it. So I don't think some level of bias is good, but a lot of bias is obviously bad. We need to put the right face in the right place. And when you see how Ferguson erupted, and how there wasn't enough African American faces in that law enforcement agency, I think that's a bad thing. I think on some level, if we should do everything we can to make sure that the demographics of our law enforcement community reflect the demographics of the people that they police. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. But first and foremost, I need qualified people to do the job. It's a very difficult job, and it's getting a lot harder. I don't care the color of the face, as long as the face is competent, and we can look at that as it shakes out in the end. I understand the need and the direction of that 1,000%. I agree with it 1,000%. I remember when you came down and helped teach a class, I drove you to the airport, and we're driving to the airport, and you're like, wait a minute, is that exactly where they filmed that movie Sicario? That's the wall. That's we're driving 50 feet away from it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's insane. And so being from a vastly minority community where I'm at, I've never felt like I haven't been included. I've never felt like that. I'm certain I've had biases against me. I'm sure I've had biases against people, but I don't let it affect my overall thought process of how I deal or work with things. Some people can throw out there, well, but your initial, that's what got you looking at me, or this or that. No, the only bias I know law enforcement officers, and I can talk to this, I have, almost 30 years in law enforcement. The only bias we have is, I'll tell you right now, we do not like career criminals. I don't care what color you are. I don't care if you're 5'10". I don't care if you're 6'9". I don't care who you are. If you're a career criminal preying on our communities, we will find you. We will. I mean, that's the only bias that I can say I absolutely have. And we're starting to see that the career criminal is now truly a career to be in. And specifically in New Mexico, we have the reform of no bail. You commit a murder and you can get out. You commit carjacking, you get out. You commit 10 burglaries, you can get out. We have good time for prisoners. They even get credit for good time before they're even good.
Gosh.
Things like that. So these community reforms that were based on a lot of this data that we're talking about have absolutely failed because they forgot that there were very human reactions and interactions, that people had to criminals. It's like, what happened in Ferguson with hey, a young man died. But let's not forget that he was a violent criminal who was attacking police officers as well as his community. That was the initial response.
That's right.
And we forgot about everything else. I'm not saying it's a good thing that a young man died. It's horrible. A young man died, had his whole life ahead of him. But officers were responding to a violent, ongoing crime, and it just continued. It's just one of those things. It's a very, very tough dynamic right now.
It is a tough dynamic. And speaking of right now, what's going on in the anti-lockdown riots in Australia? Last night, someone shared with me a video of, it was a lot of, I didn't recognize what it was at the time, Pat. I don't know if you've seen this video, but it's a beautiful street in France. And there's people having a picnic in the middle of a street. I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of people just having a picnic. And the reason they're having a picnic with their family in the street is because they don't want to have to show their papers, their vax papers, to go into the restaurant. So they're like, okay, no problem. We'll just have a picnic on the street then. And we're not wearing masks. I mean, I say all this because the question that Greg poses is, do you see our law enforcement and military enforcing any of the potential mandates similar to Australia, the UK, and the rest of the world?
I can tell you I won't. Well, and again, a lot of people say that, but, bottom line, we had that. New Mexico was one of the most locked down states during the pandemic. Everything was shut down. I mean, everything was absolutely shut down. Vaccine or no vaccine, not up to me. But that's the glory of being American. You get to make decisions. Somebody doesn't want to get the vaccine, they get sick, they get sick. Somebody wants to get the vaccine and they don't get sick, they don't get sick. If there are side effects from the vaccine, that's the glory of making those decisions. So very early on, as a supervisor, we would get that. Hey, somebody walked into Walmart, they didn't have a mask on. I would just clear the screen on our CAD system. I would just clear the screen. We're done. We're not going to that. People are like, well, you're required to go to that. No, that's not law. It's not being broken. That's a mandate. It's a prerogative of somebody who made that decision, and whether it's a governor or city council or some things like that. I can tell you there's not very many law enforcement officers who are all in when it comes to things like that. But unfortunately, sometimes you do have bosses and they make really dumb decisions on how people are going to deal with things like that. But I during the pandemic, we dealt with this on a daily basis, 2 or 3 times a day, and we would call it the haves versus the have-nots call for service. Somebody would call because they're pissed off. Well, I have to wear a mask, and he's not wearing a mask, so I want, we would just politely walk up and say, hey, there's a mask mandate, and we'd leave.
Yeah. I tell you, I love that. Roger Barber is on. We were in the Marine Corps together. Good morning, Roger. Roger says good morning. And Roger sent me a link to something that's pretty amazing. I shared it on social media this morning. It's a Marine Lieutenant Colonel in uniform who says his name clearly, and he's a battalion commander at the moment. And he gives like a 3 or 4 minute, very impassioned speech. He's like, look, enough is enough, and he just committed career suicide. I'm gonna tell you right now, it's an amazingly brave thing. And he admits it. He's like, look, I know I'm probably going to lose my command. I'm probably going to lose everything, but somebody in a leadership position has to speak out for what our administration's doing. And I was just like, wow, that is courage. And I say that because it's also courage what our law enforcement are doing every single day. And as we see infringements on our Second Amendment rights or on our personal liberties and freedoms, to not enforce those things, I think is incredibly powerful. And it may start at the lowest level like that. And hopefully it will eventually percolate to the top. That's my prayer anyway. Dave Brothers asked the question, Pat, I'm going to throw it to you. Says, can you comment on the recent stream of home invasions that have been repelled with lethal force by these citizens, I would imagine?
Great job.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask that. I get this question a lot. People ask, well, what's your opinion as a law enforcement officer about people, concealed carry? Love it. Almost 100% of law enforcement officers that you speak to out on the street love the fact that people are. I go nowhere without a gun. I know you don't. Probably 100% of the people watching this podcast right now will not even walk out their front door without some kind of, something to protect them and their families. 1,000% support that. But please understand, when we show up, cameras are recording. We have a job to do, and I would certainly tell people to have an understanding, to understand their civil rights if they're involved in a deadly force encounter. I've had my rights read to me before. It is not an easy thing to sit across the table from somebody who reads you your Miranda rights, but it is an aspect of understanding when you take that on and say, I will protect what is precious to me. That's part of it. And so I support it 1,000%. And, wouldn't it be hypocritical for me to say, hey, wait till I get there? Absolutely not. And you're going to continue to see that level of crime rising. Not only that, it's being recorded now. Everybody has a doorbell camera ring, or some kind of app. And so now you're getting a front row view or Wi-Fi view of actually what's been going on for a number of years. But there is an ongoing increase of that. And I think it is most likely, it is because of the drug trade right now. There's a couple things that are going on. Communities are being flooded with fentanyl and methamphetamine. I'm from New Mexico, and everybody keeps asking me about Breaking Bad, and I try to tell them, you thought it was an entertainment show, but it was a reality series. When I first started, we'd send drugs off to the lab to test. Like, oh, this is 50% pure. Literally, we are seeing 95, 98% purity of the drugs. The fentanyl, we're absolutely flooded. We're absolutely flooded with this, and it's creating a zombie nation almost. We're running into crimes. You're like, literally, we had a guy chop somebody's head off, kick it around like a soccer ball, and people are just absolutely out of their mind with this drugs. And I'm not an addiction specialist. I'm not, but it's creating a whole different level of criminals right now, and so we are seeing that.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Pat, is being there on the border, what have you, is there a border crisis, or, what, you've been there for a long time, man. What are you seeing down there?
When you see the numbers, it's hard to argue, say it's not, being down here on the border, and you've been down here. We've driven around my community with you and Mike, and, a lot of people are absolutely awestruck about the vastness of the border, and the border crisis, we're seeing it. Then again, it's a crisis. I had a call the other day where some guys called and said, hey, look, man, we have all these people from different nations, and we need some help. Well, the first thing I told them is, they're still human beings, and we need to provide them. And a lot of people will see this, and they'll see it within a newscast, and they'll realize, hey, we were there for 8-10 hours, dealing with 20-25 people. And they have basic needs as humans. They need to have food and water. Ladies need lady things, and there's kids, and, we have to be humanitarian about it, to be empathetic to the needs of what's going on. But we're also a nation of laws that must be followed. So it's kind of tough, being from a border town. A lot of people say, we just need to shut the border down. I'm like, yeah, well, come on down, show me how, because this is vast. People don't realize how vast the border is, specifically in Arizona, New Mexico, some of these areas, Texas, I'm certain also. So, I have to have the human empathy thing, because again, you can't sit there and spend 6, 8, 10 hours with people and not have some kind of human emotion or connectivity to them. And if you do, you're a robot. And I'll be honest, you shouldn't be doing this line of work. So I wish there was a perfect answer. There is not, but it is an ongoing problem. And unfortunately, it's becoming quite a strain on our first responders. Because we had to have paramedics that were there for 4, 5, 6 hours going through everything. We had to have our firefighters there helping out. We had our victims and assistant panels come out. We had our law enforcement officers there. So we're pulling away from the resources that we have to deal with this real situation.
Well, yeah, and they can't take calls for service because they're dealing with something right now. So again, it goes back to what one of our viewers this morning said earlier, Pat, and that is you got to be your own first responder. And that's the way I
Absolutely.
think most Americans need to be looking at it right now, because as the numbers on the street are dwindling, and hopefully, like you said, there's a 5-year plan to get our the strength of our police officers up to where it needs to be. But until then, and maybe for the rest of your life, you need to look at being your own first responder. Would you agree with that?
1,000%. And again, the staffing problems that we're seeing with our first responders, our fire departments, our law enforcement, EMTs, even nursing, they're having a serious problem with recruiting, retaining, and retention. And again, these programs require, all government entities run on yearly budget schedules, but it takes 2 years for me to select, recruit, train, and certify a police officer or a firefighter. So that's a 2-year plan on a 1-year billing cycle, and we're already 3 to 5 years behind because of the numbers that we're seeing that have left. It is to a point where it's these services that we're able to provide have been impacted, and so absolutely, people have got to be very, very. You got to be keen on what's going on in your communities, and have an understanding of how to keep yourself safe. Be your first responder. Absolutely.
Yeah. Matt says the law enforcement officers I know have the same stance on unconstitutional laws and the Second Amendment. Thank you for supporting the rights of law-abiding citizens. And I echo that. Thank you, Pat, for your not only your service, but your position on that. Let me ask you this, brother. What can our viewers or people listening to the show or watching on the Coffee with Rich YouTube channel, Pat, what can they do to make themselves harder to kill?
You got to know what you're getting into. Again, you got to have the basic skill sets of what you think you're going to need. The problem is someone will come out of the military. So, I was military trained. I know exactly what's going on. Okay, you're trained in SWAT tactics, but what do you know about, countering a carjacking suspect that's coming up to you with, a sharpened screwdriver? So you got to understand what is actually going on. I would tell them, you want to maintain a certain level of physical fitness. You got to go win the CrossFit games. That would be awesome, but not realistic. It'll keep you a little bit sharper. Get the relevant training that is going to matter to you in the most time. Again, training is expensive now, primarily because of time and ammunition. It is tough, and it's one of those things where you can do the dry fire programs, and I went through probably 5 or 6 timers and blew them out, dry firing, trying to make my Grandmaster cards and doing everything that I've done. At some point in time, you got to get out there and you got to put the bullets down range. You got to learn how to shoot them. You got to learn how to work together. You got to understand the constitutional constraints that you can use these aspects in. But absolutely, you got to have a program. You got to follow that program, and then you got to believe in that program. You may not. Some people say, "Well, I was taught this method of shooting, or this method of grappling, or I do crowd instead of jiu-jitsu, or something like that." Hey, however you want to dunk your cookie is up to you. But you got to believe in what you're doing.
I tell you, that is an outstanding answer. I've asked this question to dozens of my guests over the past couple of years, and I think one of the things that I really want to highlight that you talked about is coming from a Marine Corps background. You have rules of engagement here in America. You need to know you said the constitutional constraints that you're under, the law of use of self-defense. I bring this up because I see a lot of well-intentioned martial arts instructors that give some terrible advice. If you follow their advice, you're going to go to prison. I don't know of any other way to say it. So if you don't understand like a basic civilian use of force continuum, how to scale force, you're potentially just training yourself to go to prison. And I hate to say that, but so I'm so glad you said that, Pat. And then I like another thing you said, whatever your program is, know the limitations of it, the constraints of it, and then really kind of go all in on it. And at your other point too, like I said, it's such a great answer. Is yeah, you can do all the dry fire you want, and you can do all this, but you're eventually going to have to put bullets down range. And I think that goes for martial arts as well. You know, you can do all the kata you want in your garage, but eventually you're going to have to go toe to toe with another person to test that, whether that's force on force training with sim guns or whatever. What a great answer! Really like that. What is your current everyday carry? Is there something that you would recommend most people carry with them, Pat?
Well, being a sponsored shooter, of course,
That's right.
um, my agency is extremely, because of our strong background in competitive and 3-gun and things like that. My agency policy basically carry whatever you want. We have guys that carry, full custom STIs and things like that. JD Enterprise rifles, Wilson Combat handguns and rifles and things like that. So for me, my everyday carry, I basically have 2 of them. If I'm just going to go run real quick to the gym or something like that, carry a Smith & Wesson M&P 9mm Apex trigger, fiber optic sights, with a little spare sidecar magazine. Or, if I'm really out and about, I'm going to be somewhere, I'll carry a Glock 26 that has been modified by Wilson Combat. And, the guys over there did it up for me real nicely and everything like that. So, and I'll carry that with a spare 15-round magazine, a Glock 19 magazine, but I'll have it with a flush fit. And then I carry a little small Surefire light in my pocket. But I think a lot of people say, well, why don't you have it on your gun? Because I don't really point my gun at a lot of things, but I point my flashlight at a whole lot of things. And just again, one of those constitutional constraint type things. And those seem to work out pretty well, in the day-to-day that I carry, and everything that I do.
Yeah, I love that. Very similar. I carry a Glock 26 with a Glock 19 mag in it. And what is there an ammo that you carry that you'd be willing to just tell us what it is?
Well, I used to go down that rabbit hole, but pretty much now it's whatever gets sent to us. But the data that we've done and the shootings that we've been involved in here, a lot of them around vehicles and cars and things like that. And so for right now, the best ammo that I've seen that works in the small barrel platforms and the full size platforms is we're very well sold on the Federal 124 plus P HST round. It's worked fantastic in our shootings. Works really well in all the packages that we've seen that people offer, the small, this and that. We've done a lot of the data-driven information shooting in and around cars, windows, things like that. And it seems to work pretty well for us right now.
Yeah, and I remember being out there and you were showing me some of the data on that, some of the actual videos of people getting hit with those rounds. And I went to all Federal HST after you showed me that too, Pat. So I'm very pleased with that ammo. Of course, no sponsorship at all with that. It seems to be really good stuff.
It works great for us. And again, when we get ammunition in New Mexico, we can sole source or we can get it on a bid process. And sometimes they'll send out different types of ammunition. But we've pretty much stayed with the HST specifically because of the way it works in and around cars, glass, windows, things like that. It works really well as is very consistent, whether it's, a 2.5-inch barrel or a 5-inch barrel gun, things like that. So we've had great success with it. So we just stick with what works.
And you get reliable expansion even through multi-layers of clothing out there?
We have, in our officer involved shootings, we do a lot of after action reviews of them to make sure what we're doing is best practices and make sure that our officers communities are as safe as they can be. And again, it's not, we're not, just like, oh, I want to see what happens with this or this or that. But it is certainly information that we have to make ourselves better in the day to day. And so we've done some pretty extensive research on that. And that seems to be working best for us right now.
Awesome. A couple of questions left, Pat. Thank you for being on here. I know we're about almost an hour and 15 minutes, man. Time flies when you're having fun. We'll definitely need to do it again.
Oh, yeah.
Where is
Absolutely.
all this? Yeah, man. Where is all this? Maybe I'm making more of it than I should, but I see a slow erosion of freedoms, and maybe it's brought on by the pandemic. Maybe it was something going on culturally, like with wokeism or or whatever. But
Yeah.
I see an erosion of freedoms here. And do you see this continuing, or do you see the pendulum swinging back here in a few years?
Well, and again, we've seen this in my, in law enforcement and first responders. We've seen this quite a bit. The wokeism just absolutely took us over, and it's like, wait a minute, something I said 5 years ago is now could get me terminated or fired if they found it on the text or chat, and it's like, wow, that was just a joke. I'm not saying it was appropriate, inappropriate, or what, but what we're like, I always say this: it's not sustainable what we're doing as a society. I mean, I can disagree with somebody and walk away and be like, okay, that's great. I don't have, this whole cancel culture or this whole, it's like, oh, okay. So we cancel somebody. What are they supposed to do?
Right. They don't just drop dead and disappear. Right.
Yeah. So they canceled, I get canceled right now. What am I supposed to do? I have kids, I got kids in college. I got this, that, it's a very difficult thing right now. And again, I think we need to prioritize. Did we give up some freedoms during the pandemic? Absolutely. It was kind of a give take thing because, I remember having to do security at stores for toilet paper. And it's like, what is going on with this world that, we've lost our sense of absolute community. And we saw some of that at the beginning of the pandemic. And again, I think people were genuinely, that's the first time we've seen since probably 9/11 where people were absolutely scared. And I think we're seeing that, but now we're coming out of it. But then I think we're starting to see, look, maybe we gave some things away that we didn't need to give away if we would have relied on sense of community. And we lost some of that. We lost some of that sense of community where people actually took care of one another. How do we bring the neighborhood barbecue in our homes day to day? Again, I think we need to get back to that as a country. But like I said, we have all these different problems. We have incidents going on overseas right now. We have rising crime rates. We have the lowest level of police officers we've seen. And literally, we talked about earlier, we're worrying about if Winnie the Pooh's a boy or a girl. No, I ain't got time for that. The earth keeps going around the sun doesn't go around the earth. And in that time, and that's what we all have, is just this finite amount of time. We have to be problem solvers. And to do that, we have to classify which problems we need to solve first in front of us. And some things we just don't need to deal with. It's kind of hard. My daughter, she my wife was talking to her the other day, and my wife's like, golly, she says the F word more now than she ever did before.
Looks like we lost Pat. Let's give him a second to jump back on here. Mark is on. Good morning, Mark Few. Good to see you, sir. He says, good morning, Rich and Pat. Tony says politicians come and go, but loss of liberty tend to last forever. Yeah, I agree with that. Will says, I believe we have terrorists in our own government. Yeah, that's a shocking thing, but it does make you wonder, because one of the things I wanted to talk to Pat about, and I hope he jumps back on, is the Taliban now are armed with over 600,000 assault weapons, M4s, 240 Golfs, God forbid if they got any Mark 19s, but 600,000 assault rifles and weapons. They have over 2,000 armored personnel carriers. They have over 40 Black Hawk helicopters now. And I tell you, if that doesn't concern you, then you're not paying attention. Yesterday, there was a video out showing some Taliban trying to fly a Black Hawk. Eventually, somebody will teach them, and we're going to have to deal with it. So I think this needs to be held accountable. One of the things that Jocko Willink recently said, and I have to agree with that, is it's similar to something that's on the movie Tombstone, where Wyatt Earp is alleged to have said, if I will kill anybody wearing a red sash, when he wiped out the Cowboys. And I think that's an interesting thing, because what if, and I believe this is what Jocko Willink said, any Taliban caught carrying an American-made firearm will be fired upon. So you might as well just leave them in a big pile. We'll give you a location, stack arms there, and you won't be fired on. Yeah, Tony says they just became a first world armed military force. That's absolutely true. John says, when seconds count, support is minutes away. Let's see. Let me try to get Pat back on the show. Let's see. Thank you to the 26 folks that are just joining me now. If you have any questions for Pat, go ahead and leave them here. And we'll, as I try to get him back on the show, this is the fun of live entertainment. Let's see. But if you have a question for Pat, please leave it here. Now we'll try to get him back on. Yeah, Gerald says they have uniforms also. Yeah, that is pretty disgusting, but it's true. They have MARPAT uniforms, which is the Marine Digital Pattern Camouflage. Kathleen says absolutely. Tony says he must be having Rich internet problems. Yeah, if you've been a Coffee with the Rich viewer for any length of time, you understand that we've had some internet problems here. Let's see. Dave says the weapons are dangerous, but consider all the uniforms and identification signatures left behind as well. Yeah, that's an absolutely spot on. Let's see. Jeff says your optimism is far greater than mine. Yeah. Yeah, Davis says, name or link to the battalion commander that I referenced earlier. Let me see if I can't put a link up there to this. I think everybody needs to see it. Let me. His name is Stuart Scheller, and a very courageous position that he's taken. Pat, can you hear me?
I can hear you, buddy.
All right, there we go. I don't have your image, but I have your audio.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'm having problems here. Saying there may be an issue with my router.
Okay. John Melly is on. Good morning, John. Tony says, and the suicide bombings at the airport yesterday. Yeah.
Gosh.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, Pat, before we go here is, we've got 600,000 weapons were left for the Taliban, over 2,000 armored vehicles, and over 40 Black Hawk helicopters, and God knows what else. Thankfully, hopefully, they didn't get any Stinger missiles. If they did, we'll start watching commercial airliners dropping out of the sky.
Can you imagine? Yeah, yeah. Well, there's only one solution to that. But, it may be unpopular, but somebody already said it. Anybody seen with an American weapon would be an enemy combatant. And, there is no excuse for that. I mean, I can't even get ammunition or training time for my law enforcement officers or first responders, and we're giving it away to our former enemies? Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's hard. No. And we've seen what happens when we don't take a stand on it. That's absolutely. I'm not a politician. I will never be a politician. But bottom line, though, that is absolutely our responsibility. I mean, so what are we going to do now? Gun buyback programs. I'm going to give the guns to the gang members as a police officer. I mean, that seems like a great idea.
Well, if I lost my weapon, or if you lost your weapon as a law enforcement officer, we would be held accountable.
Well, yeah,
and
we have seen that. We've terminated officers for making mistakes.
100%. So who's being held accountable for this?
Absolutely, and I think the one viewer hit it right on the head. We have got to do whatever it takes, either to get these weapons back or make sure they're non-operational. And there's only one solution to that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And one of the solutions that I'm going to take today as a retired Marine Corps officer and private citizen is I'm going to let all my representatives know that this is unacceptable and that people need to be held account within the Biden administration. That's going to be my job today, is sending out emails and making phone calls, because we need to speak up, in my opinion. Gerald says, somehow we need men like you to be politicians. We do, Pat. We need folks like you, brother.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I just got put on a school board.
There you go. It's a start.
I mean, and I really, you want me, the SWAT guy? And they're like, well, we want a different perspective on things. Okay.
Here you go.
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's another level of service for me, another opportunity for me to learn something. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually pretty excited about it.
Well, good. I think that's awesome, man. The community's lucky to have you. Kathleen says, what another great show, Rich. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kathleen, for being on. And thank you to the 30 folks that have joined us live this morning. Even Mr. Mike Seeklander, thank you for being on. I appreciate it, Mike.
Absolutely.
Pat, any parting words? I kept you on here almost an hour and a half, brother.
Just, tell the communities we need to get that sense of community back for our country to thrive. And the bad leadership we're seeing is not reflective of everybody. It's just reflective of the bad leaders. I'm encouraged about the future. Give your first responders a chance. We're working hard. We'll get it back. I mean, I can't tell you how many double shifts I've worked. We've been trying to book this podcast for a while, and this is, the guys and the gals out there in those uniforms, the EMTs, the firefighters, your police officers, your nurses, they're working their asses off, and they're doing the best they can with some bad situations that have been handed to them, but they will handle them. And we will all come out of this together. Like I said, we're coming out of a pandemic. We're seeing rising crime rates, and I'll just tell all the viewers, to believe in the training there's a reason why they're on these podcasts, and they're going to training, and they're going to the American Warrior Society, the American Competitor Society. Go out and shoot those competitions and do things like that, and get better at what you do. Keep working hard, and just know, your law enforcement officers support you 1,000% in your journeys as well. Because I know, we talked about it earlier, that person who is going and rolling around with you doing jujitsu and has a concealed carry license, and if I am involved in an incident, is definitely going to come and save my life. That nurse is going to put a tourniquet on me. That EMT is going to come and help me out and get me through that situation. So we support them 1,000% in what they do and how they do it as well. And we know they support us, and that's a win-win, relationship for all of us. But keep working hard, keep training hard, and be that better person that you're meant to be.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. Pat, thanks for your service, brother. Thanks for your time this morning. I know that everybody's benefited from it. And again, guys, reach out to your fellow law enforcement. If that just means, buying them a cup of coffee or something like that, let them know that you appreciate what they're doing, putting their life on the line for you every single day. Gerald says, the people I know stand with the police. Thank you to all the officers for what they do. Matt Sims says, thanks, guys. Thank you, Matt, for your service as well.
Absolutely. Good to hear from you or see you again, Matt. I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Greg says, thank you. Dave says, like and share. And Mark says, thanks, guys. Thank you, folks. And remember, guys, the fight is coming. Be ready.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon, Rich.